Thanks everyone for joining us for day 2 of the week-long 2021 PBOA annual meeting. Our conference is sponsored by Pharma Solutions, Score Marketing, Veeva Systems, and Waters Corporation. And you can find out more about them at our site, pharma-bio.org/conference. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to attend the session. I'm recording each of this week's events and hope to have them up on our private YouTube channel by New Year's. All registrants will get links to that when it's available, and you can share those within your company. Today, we'll be hearing from a pair of PBOA's affiliate members, Veeva and Pharma Solutions. First up, Jason Boyd of Veeva will be discussing how to simplify quality by unifying QA and QC. After that, Pharma Solutions will be walking us through the latest on state distribution regulations for CDMOs and our efforts to reduce the burden our member companies face. During the sessions, please post your questions in the Q&A window or use the chat function, and we will try to get to all of them. And in case we go long, I can get you Mr. Boyd's contact info, and you'd be able to ask any questions you need. So let's get rolling. Jason, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I'll get my screen shared here. All right, very good. All right, so thank you guys. It's been an exciting week so far, and so I'm glad to be able to participate in this. And Gil, thank you for having us. As you mentioned, my name is Jason. I work at Veeva. I've been at Veeva for about 6 months now. Came over as a part of starting the LIMS strategy, which we're not going to talk a lot about that specifically today, but what it is connecting quality all together. And so I come to you today from Austin. I've been in Austin for about 5 years now. Austin's an exciting place. Definitely recommend that you come and join us here for a little bit when you have time. So first, just a bit about Veeva, in case you haven't heard about Veeva or from Veeva in the past. We have the pleasure of really being trusted by a great number of different quality organizations and pharmaceutical organizations. We do have quite the footprint within the top 20 pharma, but that's just a portion of our business. We are highly focused on the CDMO and generic organizations because they play such a vibrant part of the overall supply chain for the therapeutics. And then we do a little bit of work within the emerging biotechs. Those folks are definitely the fun ones to work with as they pursue rapid growth and really some pretty cool new and emerging technologies. So with that, why don't we jump into the topic for today around simplifying quality. This is a topic I'm pretty passionate about. I think that where we are as an industry is represented pretty well by this graphic. So in general, IT systems have come into the quality process and into the laboratory almost one at a time, and often in response to a problem or to an identification of a solution. And so if these has been added on kind of brick by brick or system by system, they've served a point, but that point often is disconnected from all the other systems within the ecosystem. And that naturally, not only does it harness data and trap data in one particular place, but it also ends up being a friction point for being able to create connectivity and therefore to be able to gain overall efficiency. And so a lot of different reasons for this, and we're going to go through each of them at one at a time. The end pursuit that I believe our industry as a whole needs to be diligent about is to make sense of each of these, to be able to create a digital platform of which to be able to stretch our entire quality process from one end to the other, from the beginning of QA to the end of QC, so that we can extract as much efficiency and optimize for as much efficiency out of this as possible. Over the prior to joining Veeva, I have spent some time at Merck, where I own the IT systems for labs within their manufacturing group. And before that, I was in consulting. And over the trend of my travels, I came into kind of two, I call it two high-level themes around what prevents this sort of optimization and pursuit of efficiency. And the first is, in general, too many quality systems. We just covered that in the last graphic. And what that creates within each user within the quality workflow is a lot of use confusion. So there's data gets duplicated. There's questions around which is the system of record or what is the transcription system. And so which system to use for which task can sometimes be a source of confusion, which will lead to end up working fatigue, ways of working, confusion around where they are in the process, which ultimately comes down to human and process error, questioning about what should I be doing next, where should I be going, and what system should have the data that I need, ends up creating that ways of working fatigue. The other piece around having too many quality systems is those that do end up being interfaced together, often through bespoke integrations. They end up becoming highly fragile. So as diligent as we are around change management and around finding the individual impacts for those changes, these interfaces end up being very difficult to work with, and can often an upgrade in one side of the interface can end up breaking the interface and end up reducing overall efficiency as a result. The last piece that I hear from a lot of the business, particularly the business side of the folks, is an overdependency on IT. There's a growing discomfort, particularly as digital natives are entering the workforce, around why must we have, or why do we need this dependency on IT to be able to execute in our systems. And sometimes they're often viewed as an impediment for being able to make some progress. And so this theme, if you will, this problem theme, it creates what I think is a pretty common pursuit. And to do this towards simplification, the first thing that should be considered is to consolidate and decommission. So going back to that prior graphic with all the different siloed systems, often there's opportunities to be able to move capability or functionality from one system to another and be able to decommission existing systems. The second part of that decommissioning, it's not uncommon for new systems to be put in place that cover a portion of the workflow, but not all of it. And so you end up with just a little bit of the business process remaining in that legacy system, maybe for good reason, maybe for not. And so really pursuing that decommissioning within consolidation efforts is a worthy pursuit. The next thing is to abandon and redeploy. It's not uncommon for a great spreadsheet to become a better access application. And that access application is really known by one or two lab personnel or quality personnel. It was created with noble intent. It was created for efficiency. It probably solved a particular problem. But now the individual that knows that application isn't around anymore, and it's been maybe tossed over the wall to IT, or it's trying to be supported through a knowledge transfer, and it's just not meeting the goal, and it's becoming a distraction. And so abandoning that, redeploying that capability elsewhere is another noble pursuit. And then lastly is maximizing the capability. As you look at the applications within your ecosystem, it's worth looking at where can those applications be extended. As you're looking particularly at the divide between QA and QC, there are systems deployed where you're only using a portion of it. It was the best of breed during the selection process. It had some other capabilities, but that wasn't part of the project scope because that part of the business process was already in use elsewhere, and so it wasn't considered. I think taking an inventory of your applications and where their capabilities could be extended to will also combat the problem of too many quality systems and give you collateral of which to do these other two. The last or the second major theme that we'll cover today that ends up being an enemy of simplification and therefore efficiency is this concept around digitization, but not digitalization. This is, it can be a little consulting language there, but I think it's important to get the concept around when an application takes a paper process and digitizes it. It doesn't necessarily meet the objectives or particularly the return on the investment of becoming digital. Maybe the most classic of this example is a electronic document management system. We'll see later where I'll advocate for the proper placement of paper processes, and those they serve a purpose, and I don't think they'll ever go away entirely. However, purely taking paper and digitizing it into a document management system can be short-sighted because that's not solving the unstructured data aspect of what is contained within that document, And while it does provide some benefits around collaboration and around communication and collaboration, it still locks that data into a document, and therefore that is not extensible. So with that as an example, the parameters of this problem is, the first is inconsistent data representation. So having an object or an entity represented in one data structure versus another across the systems prevents that digital connectivity, and is something we need to start breaking down. Human middleware often shows up in between individual IT systems. So individual IT projects, they end with a deployment, and there's not an interface that's created, and a human is put in between the two, and that creates complexity. That prevents this next one around systems not talking to each other. Either the systems aren't designed, the systems that were selected were for the transaction and not for the quality ecosystem, and so therefore they're prevented from talking with each other because they simply weren't designed to do that. And then lastly is the custom solutions. Oftentimes these are bespoke systems taken out of the noblest of intents. Internships and automation within Microsoft products is probably the most common. And they don't have longevity because they don't have the support of the system. So to combat these, I think we need to look to harmonize our business process and master data before we start doing tool selection. I think this is one of the most common shortcomings, which we'll cover in depth later, that we begin with tool selection instead of looking at the business process for digitalization first. Master data is the foundation of all of our systems, and that needs to be designed, not a transaction with a project deployment. Next is looking at data lakes. Data lakes can often solve this problem of inconsistent data representation. Frequently, they struggle at becoming compliant for GMP-based decisions, but providing an opportunity to remove some human middleware and to normalize the data for representation and downstream analytics will solve that digital divide from digitization. And then lastly, looking at IT systems for orchestration. It's very common and understandable to choose systems within quality for the purposes of the transaction. So executing and controlling quality events, or managing your samples, or executing your tests within a QC lab. However, the business orchestration above that, to be able to move, for example, a sample from the ERP all the way through to quality release at a level above the transaction system, will provide those connection points to make the overall process fully digital. So with those two themes and those pursuits set up, let's take a look at a digital maturity roadmap. And I think each of these have a place. We'll go through them individually. And the purposes of walking through them is to help explain and give words to where your inventory system and where your process can be held up against in order to determine where to go from where you find them. Starting on the far right is our end destination, is being able to have a complete end-to-end digital workflow that encompasses all of your QA processes and all of your QC processes to be able to gain full efficiency. I think that the pandemic over the last too long, it has shown the need for speed as being a value to humankind. And so our ability to extract the pre-competitive efficiency out of our quality process is an aid to our supply chain and provides benefits for us all. So with that as the destination, we'll start on the far left, describing the paper process. I'm a proponent of having a paper process in the beginning. I think that it helps define the business process in the most collaborative way. And it doubles as a business continuity effort. No matter what the investment is from all of our collective IT providers, there is still a need for protecting the supply chain of the product that everybody is creating. And often the only way to do that is for a comprehensive business continuity plan that involves paper. And so I don't believe it's a loss of investment to be able to do that. But that's a momentary stop in the generating value within digitalization. The next possible location is digitization with isolated data. We covered this a little bit earlier with our electronic document management system. A QMS system may very well be the same way if it doesn't talk to the adjacent systems. And LIMS systems definitely within QC can end up being an isolated data location designed for the transaction. These individual systems deployed in isolation prevent efficiency and create complexity within your ecosystem because they are not designed to be additive to your digital workflow. Instead, they're stopping at the transaction. And so that's a point of investment that should be pursued. The next possible stopping point in increasing the digital maturity is the autonomous deployment of technology. What I mean by this is that a system that is selected is then given autonomy to the organization, possibly the location, for that system to be used. And this is not restrictive. I've definitely seen even the most simplest electronic quality systems be deployed differently within the same company. The challenge with this is while you'll have a single, call it an enterprise system, so you're not dealing with the isolated digital data, but now you have differing workflows and you have challenges around connecting those workflows or the data represented within those workflows to the larger quality landscape. That ends up being restrictive because you're not able to pull that full digital thread from the beginning to the end, and you pass a lot of the lift to maybe a data lake or even your reporting entity that has to extract data from different locations and then normalize it. So this is also not a great place to stop as you're looking at cataloging your individual systems. Next point up, and the last one here, is disconnection of digital silos for QA and QC. Sometimes this happens just out of lack of foresight. You end up with different organizations that are deploying systems for their benefit. Classic would be a QMS system from the QA side, and then a LIMS system or an ELN or an instrument side from the QC. And it's deployed with the greatest of intents. It's solving a digital problem. It's connecting within that ecosystem, but it's not reaching often beyond the org of which had ownership for that deployment. And so the barrier, right, the end of the process that was the visible nature for the owning entity ends up not connecting downstream. And so that's where that kind of human middleware and the too many systems within quality begins to come from. I was talking to a leader the other day, and they were describing their quality makeup, and they said they had over 100 different quality applications, ranging anywhere from paper processes to bespoke systems, and then to large enterprise systems. And his desire was to get that down to 4 systems through some of the tenets that we described before, particularly through maximization and redeployment to maximize those qualities. And I think as you look at this maturing graph, I think this is an adequate process to be able to evaluate what systems you have deployed, and therefore which you can redeploy or reimagine along your digital journey. All right, so that's the roadmap. Why don't we switch over now to looking at the common pain points that will happen within that process. Okay, so if you've bought into what I've been describing so far, then you're probably thinking of your existing systems and wondering, yeah, this is not meeting expectations. This one is really isolated from another, and maybe you're looking at next year. Maybe you have projects planned for next year that are combating some of these what I've already shared. And so here's 4 points that has been in my experience of tripping points or potholes or problem areas that show up within this pursuit. And the first is business change management. It's critical to me to look at the entire quality continuum, again, stretching all the way from the beginning of QA to the end of QC, and look at that as a contiguous business process, and bringing together the leaders that have oversight, the folks who have momentum and the tenacity for change, and defining what that overall business process is, and then managing the change within those collected organizations for the redeployment or the project that you're going to pick up to make simplification a priority within your organization. So starting with business change is paramount, or else you will end up with many of the negative consequences and stopping points that I've discussed previously. The next major problem area is the digital process design. It's not uncommon. In fact, I was involved with a a LIMS system that they redeployed on new technology, and they basically rebuilt their entire old LIMS system configuration in their new technology. And it wasn't good. It did not work out. And that was a result of not having a digital process design. So it's not uncommon for this to create some challenges, which is the reason why business change management is the leading factor for this. Challenges such as, where is e-signature applied? Where is it necessary? How are you handling Alcoa principles? These are all elements of interrogating your solutions that you've selected or that you will select, and looking at how they meet the requirements for quality that may differ from how you would have done that with paper. Replicating your paper process in a digital system is going to lead to longer return on investment, if any return on investment at all, and it's going to create some of the frustrations that we've talked through already today. So evaluating your digital process of what it can be within your systems of choice is going to be a key to success, and a potential shortcoming if you leave that out of your project. Next is looking at your data and recognizing that there are multiple roles for data. It's very addicting to look at the transaction, designing for the transaction, because speed is, and particularly in QC, is paramount. However, that same data can be used multiple times. Okay, so using it within the transaction is still critical. However, being able to provide feedback loops and design the data for analytics, understanding that data, while be transactional in one system, will be referenced in another within a separate quality system, is the critical foundation of data design within your ecosystem. So cataloging the life cycle of the data all the way out to maybe annual reporting and beyond is an important input into your digital projects. And then lastly, it's quite common in my travels to see a project with a beginning and an end and an outcome. And that makes a lot of sense, particularly in a waterfall type of environment. However, to me, that's short-sighted. These quality systems need to be reflective and responsive of the existing business process, and need to be striving for continual improvement. In order to do that, you don't want to spend, and particularly in human capital and in your financial capital, all of your available capabilities in the project with that defined beginning and end. So an alternative way to look at this is to define what is the minimum viable product that you can begin to create some of these changes with, reflecting back on the digital maturity, while reserving both your human and fiscal capital for ongoing investment. And this is not novel, it's very agile in nature, but it takes a cultural understanding that in order to achieve the greatest level of optimization, you have to know where your critical stopping points are, and how you're going to continue to tune and invest into your entire ecosystem, not just one tool deployment, but your entire quality platform, in order to extract the most amount of value from that deployment. All right, so with these being the common pain points or common tripping points that I've seen, let's cover what the success factors are within building of your quality platform. And I do want to stress that it is yours. The quality platform that I envision is a collection of tools that is specific to your instrument catalog, to your product type, to your network optimization. This is really a digital business process that has tools that are in service to it, and deploying each of your individual systems within those guidelines is going to gain that simplification and overall drive your overall efficiency. So far left here, we have master data. We talked about the critical role of master data in separating orgs and separating systems and providing that interconnectivity. As you look at your master data, that needs to have a system that serves as the primary system, which is providing the publication versus the subscription. And that needs to sit within a dedicated org. And that, going back to the business change management, is a critical part of deploying the rest of your systems. Without defined data movement, you end up with transactional only systems. And that decreases or eliminates the digital nature of your quality platform. Master data management is a specific skill set. And so understanding and hiring and talent development and management around contextualizing data and understanding the life cycle of that data through the individual systems is a focus, not an outcome. And so the system, org, and skill set all combine into where is master data going to be managed and where is that oversight with each system that's part of your quality platform. Next, we have process orchestration. Within a quality platform, the provision for orchestration between individual transaction systems is the critical points for failure from the prior slide, but it's also your opportunities for that end-to-end digitalization within quality. Understanding how that process can be validated, how the connection, say for example, how an out-of-spec result within your LIMS affects and automates the laboratory investigation in your QMS is an example of process orchestration, right? Understanding how that works, automating it, and providing the proper communication around that can create a very simplified user experience. Okay, so the type of things we would want to answer out of process orchestration is, what is the right first time approach? So given a given example or an outcome, what is the very next right thing that I ought to be doing as an actor or a persona within your quality process? Now that may touch multiple systems, and that's part of the digitalization. Next is flexibility. We understand that business is going to get done, and it's going to be done creatively because we hire the best that we can deploy against our particular problem sets, and that talent management is going to be creative in solving the problems of the day. And so the flexibility of the overall platform to accommodate those changes and to provide insight and therefore efficiency from the folks executing that project or executing those transactions is paramount. And so at an orchestration level, outside of the individual systems, the flexibility built into the digital journey of your data is going to be a asset to you as you do with a simplification. Then lastly is feedback loops. How do the users of the system communicate with the owners of the systems? Okay, how does that, going back to the MVP and optimization, how does the use of the MVP influence the investment in optimization, and how are you storing, ranking, and deploying those improvements over time? Particularly as it deals with multiple systems working within each other. Next up, we have user interface. Having a user interface, I think that we've all become quite spoiled with our consumer electronic experience, and our business user interface has languished in many of our quality systems. And so having a common user interface that, going back again to the maximizing of total use, provides each individual user comfort that they're doing the right thing, removes that ambiguity of which is the right system or what is the right process in which system, and provides comfortability as you begin to extend that. So having a intuitive and common user interface that connects as many of your QA and QC processes together is going to improve the way of working for your individual stakeholders. And then you gain the benefit of being able to create a full task list, understanding that you're giving to that end user, not just what is the punch list for today, or what is the forced ranking of due dates of the individual tasks for today, be them inside of your traditional QMS or learning management or your LIMS system, but also what's upcoming next, kind of shifting that efficiency optimization to the individual user requires them to be able to have full insight into that. Both for today as well as tomorrow and for the week. Having a user interface that is more focused on visual guidance instead of text-based is going to improve their experience as well. And so being able to see where a particular, let's use a batch for an example, where a particular batch is within its process, even if it's diverted off into quality events, and giving visual indicators of that batch as well as grouping of those batches is going to improve the simplification of your quality platform. And lastly, we have integration. So integration is the key to eliminating as many tasks, both downstream as well as providing for things like review by exception and others that gain efficiency. And so the first benefit of integration is clearly paper elimination, right? Being able to remove logbooks, being able to remove calibration requirements, being able to remove method execution content. All of this comes from integration, from the simplest of things like integrating balances and pH meters to the more complex happens within integration. That is highly dependent upon the rest of what we've talked about here today: master data, process orchestration, et cetera. And then the last piece of integration is looking at what is the data required at each decision point. So evaluating your personas within your quality process, again, from QA to QC, and looking at what is the data required at each decision process within that unified workflow is what's going to design your platform for success. Okay, so for example, being able to present your chromatography and audit information, your chromatography graphs and audit information from your CDS inside of your LIMS system, if that's where your QA function is for a batch process, is highly valuable to that person because it's a common user interface, provides process orchestration, but it's only possible through a master data design that allows for that integration to take place. So these are the principles that I would suggest are part of the pursuit of building your quality platform. And let's recognize that this doesn't happen, it doesn't come in one box, right? You guys have existing systems that have been deployed. They're each at their own different life state within their system, or within their life cycle, excuse me. And so it's the choice of the next system, right? As you look to replace and simplify, or upgrade and simplify, or expand and simplify, it's this quality platform view which is going to gain that simplification, improve your user experience, and ultimately gain the efficiency that we're all looking for within the batch release process. All right, that was my last slide. We have a little thank you slide here. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn if that's of interest to you. We have a little URL here for some more information you can get about our view on quality from Veeva. But otherwise, I think I'm ready for Q&A.
Don't see anything in the chat window, so guys, start posting some questions. I'm meanwhile wondering, how has your Merck experience impacted what you're doing now in terms of how you approach, especially from a CMO perspective, this sort of stuff, when your background, when you're coming from a large pharma side like that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So my Merck experience in general was invaluable. My time in, maybe you guys will chuckle this, my time at consulting, it's different when you got to own the solution instead of just talk about it, right? And so the time there was extremely interesting. What I learned there, particularly as it relates to CDMO, is the externalization concept of your customers is real to your customers. Okay, so I didn't get to be able to see this project to completion, but there was an effort towards how do we provide system access and the transference of electronic data, right, for the CDMO place, but really in bidirectional, both from ordering as well as from the activity that's happening on that side. There was a little bit of angst that was showing up around supply chain data integrity. Okay, that was like, where are those lines, and what is the quality agreement in between, particularly from a manufacturing side. But that didn't get to a resolution. The opinions were pretty wide there, and so that didn't get to a final conclusion. But I think that's probably worthy of a separate conversation.
Our first question in asking, how would you measure the greatest ROI when building a business case for digitalization within quality?
How would I measure the greatest ROI? So to get to ROI, in general, there's always the before and after and cost of the delta, right? And so I would view it in two different angles, and this is how we did it actually in a past life, which is one is how many tasks are there able to be removed. Okay, so in a digital format, you should be able to remove certain things from your process by validating the process versus repeating that process every time. So how many tasks are you able to remove? And what is your cost of deviating from particularly your procedure execution? So being able to quantify the number of, however you qualify them, quality events or CAPAs or your whatever that jurisdiction is, quantify what that cost represents to your organization and what your expected lowering of that is going to be as a result of providing particularly that digital orchestration or digital method execution, so that you then generate either a lower cost of quality, right, or you're able to provide an expanded throughput as a result of redeploying that capacity.
Are there degrees to which making investments like this could run counter to existing quality agreements that customers have or CMOs have with their customers? Are there aspects of this that, we want to make this investment, but we're going to need to rewrite parts of the quality agreements and, introduce complexity that way?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I haven't read all of the quality agreements, so yeah, of course, anything's possible, right? Depending on what was the nature of that, right? But I would expect that most of the quality agreements are outcome based and they define the individual processes, but they're not defining the individual steps within those processes. So I would expect that there's always danger, right? Let's leave it at that. There's always danger of that, and that should be reviewed with caution to make sure that you're not getting outside of your agreements with those. However, I would think that all of your customers would appreciate the digitalization of your quality, providing greater oversight and compliance posture. And so therefore would welcome any digital journey that you're willing to invest within in order to be able to provide them with greater consistency within your deliveries.
One of our members wants to know, and I'm not sure if this is within your bailiwick, what trends do you see in investments in quality broadly? Not just automating a function, but upgrades in manufacturing, et cetera.
Yeah. So the areas that I've seen, right, let's not say that this is the areas, it's just the areas that I've seen, right? So you get kind of Jason's opinion, but is moving the testing within quality control as close to the manufacturing as possible. Okay, so this has to do with either micro labs or repositioning labs or investing in that. I've also seen high investment into planning and scheduling to be able to do optimization around that, and that both consumes, so the data elements that I've seen consumed for that are ERP data, training compliance data, as well as laboratory data, right? So this has to do with competencies and work schedules, et cetera, in order to be able to maximize the throughput within that quality lab area, if you will. And then from a QA side, if you will, the investment has been around analytics is an overused term, but it's around downloading the activity data or I guess the transactional data from like a QMS system and trying to correlate that to beyond just like batch level data, but more into method, individual, instrument, and then instrument maintenance and these types of things. Really kind of going a secondary level within the QC execution to be able to improve the QA oversight through that transactional data. So that's primarily where I've seen it. Let's not use that as a whole, but that's where I've seen the projects show up.
Understood. Now, how do you recommend, prioritizing legacy systems when it comes to making those upgrades and, making those changes? Are there criteria you use in general, or is it simply wow, that's way too old?
Right. So an aspect that I didn't have time for in the talk today, so I appreciate the question, is that there's an obligation to maintain versioning with your vendor with all of your applications, because the further you get away from that, the more costly your upgrade or replacement will be, and that ends up being a problem. So my recommendation would be to inventory your current quality ecosystem on two parameters. One is what is the age and supportability of them, and that goes all the way down to the operating system level. Okay, so the full stack, if you will, and look at what is your cost of maintenance and cost of requirement of maintaining that current capability in its current state. The second is that quality systems are in essence, they will run your ability to release product, and so these systems tend to want to be static by nature, but they can also be costly, both in fiscal as well as human capital for deployment. And so inventorying what that supporting function is to those, and what is the longevity of particularly the infrastructure that that's sitting on, right? We all live in kind of a cloud first, cloud native type of pursuit. And so the investment in your quality system should be consistent with your senior level executive expectations for the longevity of that technology. a lot of the customers that I've worked with before joining Veeva, I saw them transition from, instead of getting an exception to be on the cloud, to have to justify staying off of the cloud through an exception. And so I would be cataloging those systems according to those two parameters, and then force ranking their ability to be replaced or upgraded. Okay, not all of them have to be replaced.
And our last question, unless somebody posts another one in the interim,
Mhm.
what's the recommended project team makeup for taking on a digital project like this?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's from my consulting days. That's pretty close to kind of what I view as success. And so I would view this from a few different angles. One is, you go back to the business change management aspect of it. You need to have internal champions that are going to drive the ship, right? That they know where the decisions are going to be made. And without that, the whole project is going to suffer a little bit of a lack of a rudder, or will fall victim to whatever the outsourcing team or the consulting team ends up thinking is best. And that's not a solution. From an old consultant, I can tell you that's not a good solution for you guys. All right. So anyway, so that's the first piece. The second piece is around that data design. I cannot stress the fact that the weaknesses in most projects end up coming in business transaction design, because it turns into an IT project which focuses on the functionality, and then it's thrown over the wall to the business to input their data. And sometimes that can become an ETL project or an outsourcing hand to keyboards project, and you don't end up with a good data paradigm for that digitalization. You end up with pure transactional information, and that's too few. Okay, so there's that. And then I'd recommend you involve some degree of the vendor, because they're going to be a mature vendor will appreciate your feedback for their product and your use of their product. But then I wouldn't staff it fully with internally and vendor resources. I would also, my recommendation would be to get some solution integrators that have seen the field, seen what has broken and not worked with other deployments, either of your chosen application or within quality in general, and be able to get some of that third-party view. The tension between internal vendor and solution integrators is going to create a solid product if you have good leadership and change management from within the business.
Understood. Jason, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah,
We're going to have your contact info. And again, we've recorded this session, so we'll be able to share it with people afterwards.